Awesome. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for coming to all of you and making it through the rain and the disgusting weather that's out right now. Really appreciate it. You guys, before we get started with the chat, I just wanted to quickly talk about a question that's probably on all of your minds, which is, what is Justwomen and who invited me here? Right, so, as far as who invited you here, that would be me. My name is Valerie Avila. I work at Justworks. And Justworks, we are a one-stop shop solution for all payroll, compliance, and HR needs. But, we're not just that. What Justworks is a community. Because we actually bring our customers together to really give them access to better benefits. And as our community grows, those benefits grow for our customers. So with that, we actually are a startup, right? So we began and we've been where all of you guys have been and maybe are at the moment. And so when you're a startup, you have very limited resources. The one thing that you really do have is the support of the people that you have in your network. When we started, we really relied on the network and the friends and the entrepreneurs that we knew. And with that, we were able to grow and really expand as a company. A lot of thanks to Joanne. And so what Justwomen is, that question, what is Justwomen? Justwomen is a community geared towards really bringing female founders together and creating an environment and a resource for everyone. But basically, we think you guys are all amazing women and we wanted you all to meet and become friends. So that's why we're here. So, I just wanted to quickly introduce, of course, our amazing two speakers that are here today doing the Fireside Chat. Thank you so much for being here. So they're two amazing women, Joanne and Amy Cortese. Joanne, as some of you know, was an early stage investor in our business. And she's really is an expert in building communities. So, she's done so by blogging under the name Gotham Gal for over a decade. She actually has invested and helped build 65 different companies within the last 7 years. That's a lot. And most recently, she launched the Women's Entrepreneur Festival in 2011 in partnership with NYU. So, she's not just an active member in the regular startup community, she's also extremely involved with the New York community in general. So she chairs Hot Bread Kitchen, and she even sits on the board of both the High Line, many of you have probably walked along it, and Wesleyan University. Now tonight she'll be discussing with Amy Cortese the funding gap between both female and male entrepreneurs. So Amy, who's with us today as well, she's an award-winning journalist, author, and speaker. Her recent focus has been on the innovative intersection in between crowd finance and community. So she's a frequent contributor to the New York Times. You can find a lot of her work as well in Business Week, The Daily Beast, Wired, many more things, and many more publications. And I also encourage everybody here to pick up a copy of her book. It's called Locavesting. It's a great read. Now, without further ado, I'd like you guys to join me in welcoming both Joanne Wilson and Amy Cortese.
Great, thank you, Valerie. So thanks everyone for coming out on this rainy night. Before we start, I wanted to kind of get a sense of who's here. How many people are entrepreneurs? Okay, that's a lot of people. And how many have raised money? All right, and how many are looking for funding? How many are having a bad hair day? Okay, so I've written about women in entrepreneurship a little bit, but I have to say I spent this afternoon really reading up on it. There are a lot of reports that have come out recently, and boy, you can really get riled up about this stuff. For example, this is just one nugget I found buried in a report. Did you know that as recently as 1988, that a bunch of states required women to have a husband or another male co-sign before they could get a small business loan. Pretty amazing. Yeah. It took the Women's Business Ownership Act to be passed at the federal level to stop that.
Guess which states they are?
Yes. Okay, so it's kind of a good news, bad news scenario, and I'm just going to lay the groundwork here because there's a lot of stats that kind of paint the picture. So the good news is that the number of women-owned businesses is growing fast. It grew 1.5 times the national average. So there are almost 9 million women-owned firms in the US today. And by the way, the biggest increase is coming from Black and Hispanic women as well as other minorities. In fact, African-American-owned businesses grew by 258% over the last, I think it's 1997 to 2007. And women-owned businesses, they're also growing fast internally. The growth rate of these firms has outpaced that of all other types of businesses. And women-owned firms added 500,000 jobs between 1997 and 2007, while the rest of privately held firms had negative job growth. So a lot of good, positive, exciting news around women entrepreneurs. Now the bad news is that we don't get that much funding. In fact, we get woefully less than our male counterparts. Women receive only 7% of VC funding, and when they do get it, they get much less than their male peers. Angel investing is a little better. About 20% of angel-backed companies are women-led. But this funding gap extends to loans and lending as well. Just $1 out of every $23 in small business loans goes to a woman-owned business. So clearly, we have some problems here. So Joanne, do you look at that glass half full, glass half empty, and what accounts for these differences?
Well, I've always been a glass half full, so it's really hard to look at anything, but other ways. But damn, that's depressing. But I really do think that the next revolution will be run by women. I think we're seeing a lot of changes. The fact that all this information is being published and it's not that hard to find says something in itself. I actually read a very interesting statistic as well that women's businesses have a 35% ROI compared to men's that's at a 12%. Now again, on the average more men get funded, as we talked about earlier, but there is more understanding, I think, of investors that are looking that it's important to have women involved in companies. I mean, if you look at e-commerce, which is obviously a huge part of the world today, it's a $215 billion business online, and women make 60% of those purchases online, and they actually are 85% of the purchases online are influenced by them. So why you would invest in a business that's an e-commerce platform where a woman is not involved at the top is beyond me, because essentially women are running the internet. I think that when we see more of these kind of statistics being pulled, and obviously more women that are successful, that are having great exits, that are raising a lot of capital, that are making their household name products, that are having great exit strategies, I think that things will change. Unfortunately, there's still not a lot of women investors, which makes life difficult. So, before everyone got here, I actually am speaking at this Cornell Summit tomorrow. And I haven't practiced my speech enough, so I had a couple people torture them and listen to what I had to say. But there's one thing that really came to mind if you hear about all these women from the 1800s onward who were mostly inventors. I'm sure that many of them own businesses we didn't know about because, like, in the States, you had to have a certain percent. A man signed the thing in 1988. Women couldn't get patent because it was illegal, and so we don't know how many women actually built things because their husband's name was it, or own businesses because their husband's name on it. But consistently among all these women. For instance, there's this one woman who was the inventor of the disposable diaper. And she couldn't stand, literally, cleaning up shit every day for her kids, on these diapers that you had to wash and wash and wash. And so she took her sewing machine, she took down her shower curtains, she took some materials, and she made this diaper. And she went around to all these manufacturers, and there was other diapers on the market, but hers didn't create diaper rash, and it didn't pinch the skin. And all of these people over 10 years said to her, these manufacturers, this is not, it's a superfluous investment. It would, we don't need something like this. It's indispensable, it's not needed. And then finally, 10 years, someone said, I am going to make this product for you, and that company is now Pampers. Wow. And so you got to wonder who was on the other side of the table.
Yeah. Like you have a very eclectic portfolio, and I have some of the companies written down here, but some of these, I wonder, like, would a man have invested in these? Clue, which is an ovulation tracker, or Hey Gorgeous, a fashion site for plus sizes. I mean, what were those companies' funding experiences like? And do you think, are men, male investors now willing to take a look, or if they still not get it, and these types of companies have to go to a woman?
Clue is a really interesting one. I generally try to invest in companies that very few people are doing, so that there's a company there's 20 of them out there. It's not as interesting to me because I don't know if I'm going to pick the winner or not, and I'll let the VCs figure that one out. So Clue essentially tracks your ovulation, your period, and you could continue on this until you have menopause. I mean, so this is it's very scientific. She's really an amazing woman, and they have now this hard piece that hasn't been released yet that you can spit in, and you can put it in your phone, and it basically is 100% tracking of your body. Yeah. So what's interesting about that company is there are a bunch of them out there. And so my oldest daughter showed me, she goes, I've been using this app, I'm really into it, I've gotten all my friends on it. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. I have all the apps out there like that she chose that one, which meant to me it was really user-friendly, and it was seamless. Ends up that week, I'm in like a bunch of VC offices, and they always say to me, oh, you should talk to that woman. And I'm always thinking, why is that is like the thing? So they would tell me about Ida from Clue. And I was like, oh my God, that's so funny. My daughter, talked to me about that. So I ended up talking to Ida, and she's definitely looking at it in a very different way. But what's interesting is Glow, who was started by Max, I forgot his last name. Of course, he's one of the boys in Silicon Valley, and they've given him tons of cash. And his concept is, if you don't get pregnant on my thing, we'll give you $25,000, which is utterly ridiculous and kind of disgusting. And so, and it's not about just getting pregnant. I mean, it's like, there's a million things that go on in our body that you could share with your gynecologist or you could share with your partner. And so, my husband actually said to me, it's interesting you chose to invest in this because there's a bunch of these sort of out there. And I was like, and yes, they're all run by men. Who else should be doing this? And he's like, you make a very good point. And so it is terrific. It's been very hard to get funding, as it always is for a woman. She's in Berlin, and things are moving forward. And so she's like one of the #1 apps in many, many, many countries. And so that's pretty interesting. Hey Gorgeous, I will say, Index Ventures, who really does understand the commerce space and are great about women, invested in a large-sized company over in England. But to me, that was something that I never understood why there wasn't a company like that. In my earlier history, I was a buyer at Macy's in the large-size area, and so I kept thinking, why is no one doing this? And I rarely go out with a mission to find someone doing something in a space. But there was a young woman, Ari, who's no longer there, who was an analyst, and she emailed me. She goes, I found the company. And I was like, great. So I met with them, and I thought what they were doing really made sense. And the team was great. So, yeah.
Great. So in your experience, do you see differences in how women and men entrepreneurs approach fundraising, their style, their attitude about it, you know, their ask? I'd be curious to hear what you see as the differences, if there are any.
There are. I mean, I'm fortunate because I meet women all day long, and I meet really smart entrepreneurs all day long. And I think because I'm a woman, the women that I meet on the other side of the table, we find a comfort level, and I can talk to people, I can ask them questions about their lives and what they're doing, and I mean, even the women that I'm invested in that have partners and been with someone for a long time, I'm always like, you should have kids, do not wait. And you know, men are not going to say that to the women on the other side of the table. But I have seen many women have frustrated with raising money, and you have a lot of assholes on the other side of the table. And you know, they fall back on their data, which I totally understand. I think it's very hard when someone doesn't understand your business on the other side of the table to say, you know what, you're not for me. You don't get my business. I don't want to have this conversation anymore. Thank you for your time. Because the reality is that person's not going to invest in you anyhow, so you might as well walk out the door. I think if more women started to do that, I think a lot of more eyebrows would be raised. And I do think that women tend to cross their T's and dot their I's more than men do. And they're honest more than men are when they're pitching. If someone asks you a question, you know, I've seen women, and I've heard from men that have had pitches from women, and they'll say, you know, I don't really know the answer. I'm going to have to get back to you on that. And they don't pump their chests out enough that, you know, I'm amazing and I built this product and someone should invest in it. But what I do see is that as time moves forward and the companies get bigger and they get more money, the confidence level changes dramatically to the point where, you know, I deserve this money, I have a great company, you should invest in it, and you are lucky you get to invest in it. And so I do see that shift, which is really great to see. I mean, this one woman I've invested in very, very early, she was having such trouble, and I kept saying, what are you doing in these meetings? You know, let's have this, you know, well, I'll pretend that I'm the person on the other side of the table. And I said to her, you know, this is a terrible thing to say, because I really do believe women should be women. You should be authentic, you should be who you are, you should be yourself. You shouldn't pretend to be like a man when you go pitch a man. You should be who you are. And I said to her, you know, when you go and pitch these people, I want you to think of me sitting on your shoulder, and I want you to think, what would a guy do in this situation? And so she went to her next pitch. She was pitching all these guys, and of course, the feedback before she got there was, if you sit down, you look like you're weak. If you stand up, you look too aggressive. I mean, you can never be a winner here. And she said, she pitched these guys, and they were like kind of sitting around the table, and she looked at them, she goes, so are you in, or are you out? And they're like, no, we're totally in. We're going to give you $100,000. And she's like, oh my God, it works. And so I do think that there's something to be said for that. And you know, it's the same thing when I tell entrepreneurs. It's your company. No matter how much money you take over a period of time, you have to be the one that makes the decisions. Because if you don't make the decisions and stick with your decisions, when the company falls apart, it all goes on your shoulders. When the company's a success, everybody takes credit.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a great example. I was going to ask you, what would your advice be for women going into pitch, but I think you just gave us picture Joanne on your shoulder saying, like a man. So I want to go back to this, you know, this gap that we have and explore a little bit more like what the factors are. I mean, are women failing to ask for the capital they need? Is there a type of lean-in effect where, you know, when it comes to starting and growing companies where women are not putting their all into it, they're holding back a little bit? So in other words, are we holding ourselves back, or is it more this institutional bias, or just people liking to invest in people they know and people that look like them?
That's a good question. I think it's a combination. There's not even a question that a perfect example is right now there's a company out there, Yik Yak, I think that's what it's called. Is that what it's called? It's like making its way around the college campuses, right? 22-year-old kids, literally 2 boys. And they're going to get an insane valuation. And by the way, it might be a great company. It might be the latest jello shot on social media in regards to colleges. And then you could have someone come in and pitch who is a woman, mature company, taking a long road, doing really well, and and the people on the other side hesitate. So I think it's a combination of, that kid reminds me of me when I was 22 years old. But I also think that what's great about now is that, for women, is there is a blur between our personal life and our careers. And when you build your businesses, there's also tons of money out there. There's angel investors, there's micro VCs, there's big VCs. And remember, those big VCs are getting money from somebody else. And so even though we all know that they haven't exited on every business they've invested in a $1 billion business, they do believe when they make the investment through their diligence, it is a $1 billion market cap or $500 million market cap. And so they look at some of these businesses, maybe they don't understand them. Whatever the reason, they might say, we did our diligence, this is only a $100 million market cap or a $50 million market cap. And then it's up to you to really take a step back and say, where should I be raising money? I shouldn't be going to the 8 top VCs. I should be going to the micro VCs that have $20 or $30 million funds that are interested in a product like mine that is going to have a $50 or $75 million exit. And I do think that that's available now, more out there. And, it's just something that women should think about.
Who are some of the micro VC firms?
There's Cortese, there's Great Oaks. I mean, there's tons of them. You just have to do your research. And, and there's because I'm in so many different deals and I have so many different people that I do deals with, there's groups that only do e-commerce. There's groups that only do health tech. I mean, they're out there. You have to do your diligence in regards to who you should be talking to. It doesn't make sense to spend your time, unless you just want to hone your pitch, talking to someone who is never going to be interested in your area. You want to find someone that totally gets what you're doing, wants to be partner in your business through capital and through their Rolodex and through helping you, and it makes for a much better marriage.
Okay. We were talking generally about the funding gap, and those numbers were from across the country. But I wanted to drill down a little bit on New York City and what's happening here. Alley Watch recently kind of ran some numbers, and interestingly, women-led ventures in New York City did very well with seed and angel rounds. In fact, women-only founding teams raised 22% more on average than other ventures. But when it comes to venture and later stage rounds, that falls off. A venture round in New York City with a woman founder is 13% less on average that they're raising, and a round with a woman-only founding team is 7% less. So there does seem to be something going on with the New York City venture capital world. Any thoughts on that? You're married to one?
It could be New York, it could be San Francisco, it doesn't make any difference. I mean, I really believe if you build a company that is obvious that your trajectory is going upward, that there is a huge opportunity that you've stumbled on, that you're sticking a circle in a circle, not a square, not a circle, that people will give you money. And, and again, it has to be the right people on the other side of the table. There's a possibility that many of those businesses, got to a certain level and they became a lifestyle business, or they didn't need venture funding, or they were done with raising money. But I really do believe it. I mean, as much as I see the frustrations of women at the very beginning, if you build a major company, you will get funding.
Okay. Let's talk about lifestyle companies for a minute, because women tend to start a lot of those, and that's very, perfectly fine, very viable. But what is it about them? I mean, do you have any in your portfolio? How do investors view them? Who is more likely to invest in a lifestyle firm?
I think it's hard. I have one. Of course, I didn't think it was going to be a lifestyle business, but it is, which is completely fine, by the way. And as I've said to her, I think when you start paying everyone back, you're going to feel fantastic. There's nothing wrong with that. I also believe that in terms of lifestyle businesses, so there's this one young woman who came to talk to me about her business. She's probably going to do, I don't know, $2 or $3 million this year online. In many ways, she's in a catch-22. Like, she bootstrapped this business and she's had all the success, but meanwhile, I don't think anyone's really going to give her money because her valuation is higher at a high level at this point because she's doing $3 million a year in business. Yet on the other hand, I don't know how big her business could be. So she's in this sort of weird space. And my advice to her, and I've actually given this advice to a couple people, which is your customers probably come back and back and back and back. Do some research on who your customers are. Everyone wants to be involved in a startup business these days. Find 4 women who continue to buy on your site, email them, take them out for lunch, ask what they're interested in investing in your company. They're already drinking the Kool-Aid. They come back to you and buy the product all the time. They probably would happy. All you need is a couple $100,000 to get you to the next level. And then, you pay them off. They make dividends every year with the check. And they're thrilled because they got involved in something that they never thought they would get involved in again. I mean, there's a million different ways to fund your business.
Great. So I wanted to talk about building the ecosystem a little bit because so we know that women are more likely to invest in other women, and according to the Kauffman Foundation, venture funds with women on their teams invest in women founders 70% of the time. So how do we grow a women-friendly ecosystem and support network? How do we get more women engaged as investors at whatever level it is, micro VC, angel, private equity? But it seems like the more women we have out there investing, the better off women entrepreneurs will be, and then it all builds on itself.
It does. The thing about being an investor, which I think is why there's very few women VCs, is that being an investor is a very lonely existence. You've got your partners in your VC firm, and you meet on Monday mornings or Monday afternoons, and everyone sort of discusses their deal. You're on your own. Like, there's no camaraderie. Women love to build teams. And that's why you see a lot of the analysts that are fantastic, that are, in my humble opinion, many of them are better than the VCs that they're working for. And they leave. They leave to go to a business school, they leave to start involved in a startup. And I've talked to a lot of them, and I've been like, you're so good at this. I do hope that when you, later in life, if you choose to have a family and you're thinking about what's my next career, that you come back to this, because you'll have built that community already around you, which could be, your friends and your kids' friends, and so you don't really need that daily camaraderie that I think women really crave early on in teams and companies that they're working for, which I think I totally get it. But I do think this interesting statistic, which I told you earlier, is that out of the all the American millionaires, 45% of them are women. 60% of them made it on their own. But what's interesting about that statistic, and this is pure gut, is that the majority of them probably came out of no-risk businesses. They were in banking and businesses that were all, or even if they were investment banking, it was businesses that were very analytical. So you're coming in at a very later stage that, it really would have to be a debacle and fuck up, because reality is the numbers show you that this is going to do this, and I'm going to put in this much money, and I'm going to make this percentage on my money. So, I would love to see more women come in as investors, as angel investors, or even teams of women, particularly later in their careers. Another way to look at it, and I think that the women that are non-risk takers, there's 2 women that I met a couple of years ago in an event that I spoke to, and they came up to me afterwards, like, oh my God, this is so great, this is what we want to do next. And they both were very successful. One was in medical, one was in accounting. And I said, I'm happy to share my deals. Like, I am shameless. I want to raise money for every company I'm invested in, and I really do help them do that, because the reality is that's how you move forward. And so they were looking at these two women-led businesses, and they asked a million questions, as they should, because you don't know the verbiage until you sort of dig into the whole scene. And they couldn't pull the trigger. It was two businesses that, the good thing is they finally did pull the trigger, because the business was doing fantastic. And they each were putting in $10,000 each into these businesses, so a total of $20,000. And after a while, and I was like, I got one question for the two of you. How much money do you spend on your Christmas vacation this year? And they literally looked at me and they're like, more than $20,000. I was like, exactly. And they're like, okay, we're doing it. And so, you know, it's like that 20, you know, your vacation's gone. But that $20,000, you can get involved in these businesses, you can make an impact in a young entrepreneur's life. You know, you might say you know nothing, but you know plenty because you've been working for 40 years or 30 years, and you know, you can feel good about what you're doing. And these women now have this, you know, investments in, I don't know, like 15 businesses. So it's very cool. Your investment business.
And there are some great angel, women-led angel networks, 37 Angels, Golden Seeds. There's someone from Ostia here, Elizabeth Crowell. What do you think their impact has been? I mean, is that really, you know, making an impact on women entrepreneurs and women-led ventures?
Yeah, they're great communities too. I mean, I think that they give women a place to hang their hat, and there's a lot of great things that go on at Astia or Springboard that help women build their companies, almost like mini incubators, which I think are great. It gives them access to a lot of interesting people and mentors to speak to. You know, again, it's like the fact that we're having these conversations means that we're in a good place. It's when nobody was having these conversations, which really wasn't that long ago. I mean, you know, 7 or 8 years ago, nobody was talking about this. And so I think that the fact that this room is like filled with all women entrepreneurs says something in itself.
Yeah, it does seem to be a very exciting time, and there's so much happening, and you know, programs popping up every day. Even in, you know, little towns, you know, far away from money centers, I keep seeing angel, you know, women-based angel networks popping up, and funds and incubators. So yeah, I think I'm with you on the glass full, half full.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of those groups of local angels, I've talked to a bunch of them. There's a group in Tennessee I've talked to, there's a group in Chicago I've talked to, there's a small group in Ohio, and you know, I was like, invest local. Support your local entrepreneurs. What was that?
That's my mantra.
Yeah,
it's one of my books about.
Right, you should support local. And I totally agree with you. I mean, that is the future of the next economy. And so even if it's a local restaurant or a local, you know, whatever it is that turns you on, you're going to make a bigger impact. I have met I talked to a young woman who is working for a VC out in Ohio. And she's like, you know, how am I going to, you know, make this impact? And I said, listen, you're not going to see a lot of major companies fly by you over there. Get on a plane and spend 3 days a week in Chicago. Because going to LA is going to, San Francisco is going to do nothing for you. No one's going to give you the deal. You know, you're not going to be in the deals you want to be. And New York, I think you're going to have a hard time too. So go to a place that you're close enough that you can connect. And stay local. I mean, I love that this whole thing's happening in Ohio. It shouldn't just be happening in these massive urban cities like LA or New York or San Francisco. I think it's really great.
Yeah. No, I mean, you know, New York, San Francisco, Denver, we don't have a lock on innovation. I mean, it's happening everywhere.
Totally.
And on that note, I think crowdfunding is another really promising development that can you know, help women as it democratizes finance and just bring more investors into the picture. What are your views on crowdfunding? I know some VCs in particular don't want to touch a company that's crowdfunded because they have, you know, 50 or 100,000 small investors. Of course, we're not quite there yet. We're still waiting for the Jobs Act, but I'd love to get your thoughts on crowdfunding and how that can help especially in some of these other areas outside the money centers.
Yeah. I think crowdfunding is fantastic. I think that eventually, from a legal perspective, we'll figure out how you don't have a cap table of like 400 people, which I can understand, which is upsetting to a VC, you know, and it will be one group, and that's how they'll be looked at. I think the thing that's super cool about crowdfunding, and again, it depends on the company, like consumer products is fantastic. You know, consumer products has a very different trajectory. It needs a different kind of capital. And most VCs don't understand it, particularly in the food space. If you hit one, you hit it big. Otherwise, you could like tread water for life. And so I think that's one thing great about crowdfunding. The other thing that I love about crowdfunding is that, you know, as a country, we have so much more money. And there are so many people that are, you know, have made a lot of money, that live in a variety of different places around our country. And you know, depending on your age, is being told how you should be investing your money. You know, if you're old, it should be very low risk. You know, if you're like middle-aged, you should take some for risk, some not for risk. And so, you know, if you're living in Idaho, let's say, and you happen to be working in the food business your entire life, you were in marketing and branding at like, you know, General Mills or something, and that's where you were stationed, and, you know, you're like, oh man, I'd like to put some money into these startup world. Like, I would totally like to do that. I've got like extra 100K, I'm thinking about this. And you go on like a circle up, and all of a sudden you see, you know, a chocolate business, and you're thinking, you know, damn, I've been in the chocolate business for 30 years. I've had that product. It's fantastic. I'm going to get on the phone on one of these calls. I'm going to listen to the entrepreneur. I'm going to put money in this. I'm going to call the entrepreneur directly. I could actually really help their business. I mean, they're not getting deal flow in Idaho. And so I think that's what's great about crowdfunding. Mm-hmm. My concern about crowdfunding is a lot of people don't lose their pants. And, you know, we're seeing it, I mean, even in Angel List, you know, I mean, I didn't do Angel List for a variety of reasons. I didn't want people just to say, oh, she must know what she's doing, so we're just going to give back all her deals. I want people to make their decisions on their own. But I know a lot of people that I've definitely said, hey, would you put this up on Angel's List? And they've raised, you know, $400,000 overnight with no diligence, no nothing. People are just like, oh, they're so smart, they must know what we're doing, we're going to give me $20,000 a pop, and it gets up $400,000, and it's just like, do they really know what they're doing? And so, you know, I think that we're going to see a lot of the backlash from that. And of course, you know, no one's going to bail these people out, which is why the accredited versus the not accredited is like, you know, you don't want people, you know, thinking they're going to Las Vegas and they're going to hit the big time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's talk about some of your portfolio. I mean, as I said before, it's pretty eclectic. You have like tech to scooters to ice cream to luxury lingerie. What kinds of things do you invest in? Like, do you have an investment thesis, or are you just going with what comes to you that looks great, and you know, just going with your gut?
Yeah, I do not have a thesis. Although I do have one thesis, which is the amount of money I put in the company at the very beginning and what percentage I own in the company. That is my only consistent thesis, and I always want to get a side note to ensure that as the company moves forward, I have every right to put in my prorated share to keep that percentage. That is my only thesis. And at one point, you know, I look at some businesses and I think, you know what, I have plenty in that company. I have enough exposure. I'm going to now shift from my 1%, you know, insanity to I really hope that the total amount I have in becomes 10 times worth its money. I mean, so it's a head change. I never had a thesis. I didn't want a thesis because, in regards to who and what, because I've always been one of those people who read like ridiculous nonsense that you can talk about at cocktail parties. You know, like, you know, 20 magazines a month and tons of different media. And I've always been sort of a big picture thinker. And so people come talk to me about different businesses, and I'm just like, that makes total sense. And that person sitting on the other side of the table definitely has, in my humble opinion, the ability to execute on it. And that's kind of where it's all at. And then, of course, I share, and other people are like, they're amazing, and I'm going to invest too, which is always a nice thing because they look at things differently than I do. But the reality is that if it doesn't rock my boat, I'm not going to invest in it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what qualities do you look for in an entrepreneur?
I've been doing this for quite a while now, and about, I don't know, maybe 4 years ago, this young woman came to see me. And I thought what she was doing was pretty interesting. Great provenance, like won an award, kind of thing at like one of those NYU events. And she sat in front of me, and there was no fire in her belly. Zero. Like, she talked about her business in this way that was like, and I thought, okay, now I know what I invest in. And, it's, there's a great quote, which I actually pulled from, that I'm going to talk about tomorrow, is Estee Lauder had this quote, and she said, when I build a product that I believe in, I sell always, and I sell really hard. And I sell every day. And I think that, as much as many people hate sales, you have to sell yourself, and you have to sell your business. And you have to be so passionate about your business that it comes across so much when you're talking to people on the other side of the table. And there's plenty of people that come in and pitch me, and I think, great idea, and it's too bad it's yours.
Have you ever had cases where you went with the passion when maybe the numbers or the revenue model or the business plan was bigger?
Yeah, one. It was a fucking disaster. And again, it's the failures that you really learn from. I mean, this one was a massive failure, and run by a man, and it was a brick and mortar business. And the reality is, there were so many red flags that literally they were smacking me in the face, and I just chose to ignore them because I love this business. I thought it was genius, and I thought, I knew he was really creative, but he was really building this business, and I thought, I can help this thing. I can do this, I can do that. And it just was a mess. He wasn't honest with his investors. He wasn't honest with his board. I learned so many different little things from that. First of all, this guy had literally raised money from, probably, in my humble opinion, the best angel investors in this country. Mm-hmm. Nobody read the documents but me. They were a fucking mess. It took us 9 months to clean them before anybody would put money in. I represented everyone on the board. Wasn't honest about the numbers and the financials, and found out literally 3 days before one Monday, oh, I can't make payroll next week. I mean, blew through all this cash. But what was interesting is that, fast forward, I've had some of those angels call me and go, he's starting something else. What do you think? And I'm thinking, oh my God. So it goes back to the angel list. Do these people really know what they're doing, or do they just have capital to play with? But what was interesting is there was one investor in this business who was a VC, who I went to at the end, and I was just like, listen, would you consider putting money into this thing because of these reasons, and you really understand the business, blah, blah, blah. And he came back and he just said, no. And he said something to me, which I will always remember, which is kind of in shock value, but reality, which again is the reason why, as an entrepreneur, you have to do what you do best, and it's your company, and you've got to make the decisions. Is he said to me, Joanne, I can hear in your voice, and by the way, I can be his mother, I can hear in your voice how upset you are about this company. And he said, we're not going to put the money in. He said, but I'm going to tell you something. You're not a superhero. You cannot fix this company. You have tried every single way for the past 6 weeks. You've gotten 5 people that you thought would be the CEO, and they've all said no. You've gone a million different channels. You figured out how to get this company to get you the payroll for the next week. It's over. And you're going to close this company this week. And he said, but you know what? We can close this company tomorrow, and if you and I want, we can go to Cortese for dinner tomorrow night. And I was like, damn, that is harsh. But I do think that, as harsh as that is, from an investor perspective, as much as I feel like I can save it all, I could say this one, but it was a great learning activity, I'll tell you that.
Okay, so you've been at this for 10 years now. Have you seen a change in, the types of opportunities coming to you brought by women? A change in the women themselves? Are they more savvy, more self-assured? I just, 10 years is a nice time to, kind of see some patterns.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I think that women are savvier. I'm seeing better businesses. I'm seeing much more impressive women. And I actually think that this next generation of women, the millennials, are a really great group of people. When I grew up in business, women were not embracing each other. They were not trying to lean over and help that next woman out. It was very sharp elbows because there was only going to be one woman who was going to succeed. And I was incredibly competitive and I wanted to be that woman, but I never liked that sharp elbow shit. I never went for it. I don't think it's appropriate. But this generation of women are not like that. They are very much embraced with each other. They challenge each other. They support each other. And I think the other thing which is really nice is that maybe it's the backlash of the banking industry being debacle is that I think people are now saying to themselves, what is it that I really want to do? What do I love? Do I love making shoes? Do I love making chocolate? Do I love, the real estate world? What is it that I'm really passionate about? It's not as much about making money. It's about doing something that they really want to do every day when they wake up. And so it comes across, obviously, to the people that walk in my door. But I do think that, which is why I say I think women are the next revolution, is because there is a camaraderie that's existing that I don't think existed like it exists now.
Yeah. That's great. And on that note, how do you feel personally about investing in a social enterprise or a B Corp? Is that attractive to you or not attractive for some reasons?
I like investing in businesses that have social missions. I do plenty of, I'm very, my husband and I are very philanthropic. We really care about New York. We care about education. But I'd like to see more social businesses be profit businesses. Maybe make less money, but make money. Because the frustrations that I always find with nonprofit businesses is that it's a very different mentality. And, which I understand. I never understood when I was younger, but now that I'm older and I sit on some of those boards, I get it. But it's, the Highline is a perfect example. I've been pushing them, how do we become a sustainable organization without having to go to these big donors every year. It is privately funded, but if everyone walked the Highline and thought it was fantastic and got on their phone when they left and donated $10, we would be in great shape. And so that I like, but I hate the concept that I know people sit around a table and think about the 15 wealthiest people in New York and everyone thinks they're going to get money from them to sustain their organization. And I just don't think that's a good way to behave.
How are you doing on time? I wanted to ask you about the election. We just had a pretty dramatic, some would say depressing, Republican sweep. Do you think that has any effect on women in entrepreneurship? Will that trickle down in any way, or not?
I certainly hope not. I think that government is so utterly depressing. It just really is. God, I hope someone changes it. We're seeing now that I don't think anyone's going to be having cash in their pocket in 10 years. I don't even know why we need a treasury. Except to regulate things. The reality is that entrepreneurs and because we live in a capitalist society has figured out how to make it so that we don't need to walk around cash. Venmo or Bitcoin or whatever it is you choose to use the medium. I'd like to see someone do that with the government. What's unfortunate about government is that particularly, you know, on the Republican side, if they don't have the ball, they don't want to play. And I think that they're very good at creating this illusion that they're doing well for all of good men in this country, but the reality is that the people that are only doing well under them are the people that are white with money. And it really pinpoints to the fact that the majority of Americans are obviously not educated. And so it's incredibly disturbing. And at the end of the day, I really believe that Obama has not done a great job of marketing and branding and being on message in a bold way and running his administration. I think he's done a lot of great things. I think that's what's disappointing. You know, you have to know who, just like an entrepreneur, you have to know who your customers on the other side of the table. And I think what's also unfortunate, I don't know if anyone saw Dear White People, the movie. I highly recommend it. I think it's an amazing movie that really talks about, in a very comedic way, but in a way that makes everyone in the room uncomfortable, about the reality of, you know, all the issues we have in this country around racism. And my guess is if Obama was a white man, we would not be having these problems. And I think that's really, really unfortunate.
Yeah. Okay, on that note, we want to open it up to some questions, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, let's see. Anybody with a question? Go ahead and raise hands. Any other questions? Okay. Go ahead, Pete.
Oh. Well, thank you so much for speaking. I wish we were friends. I'd be like, this is great, girl. Let's get ice cream. But they seriously think so much. So I have an online therapy platform, a marketplace for online counseling and coaching services. And we just got out of YC. And my main issue with fundraising has been that there's a couple of companies that started fundraising before us and just were a couple steps ahead. And so, you know, there can't be like competition in portfolios or whatever. But you look at those companies, it's kind of like, I think my main mantra right now is to sell the sizzle, not the steak. Because I've been at it for 3 years, we've made revenue, we've been in lots of press and things. And then I look at these guys, and the same thing, Stanford dropout, you know, with no domain expertise, and I'm like, how did you say yes to him and the due diligence that's done for them and not me, and that I get versus and still get passed on? It's just, you know, I focus on the investors that have said yes, but I guess my question is, you know, I don't want to adjust my strategy. I don't want to adjust my company. I know what I'm doing works, and my customers have shown that. But like, how do I cast a wider net? You know, because I get so many no's.
It's really hard. I think that you have to just, you know, use the investors you have to, you know, do they know any other people that they invest in? Is there any other people that would be interested? I mean, you know, you bring up a very good question, which is why? Why did you invest in those people when my company's making money and I have a better traction record? Because I really don't believe that you should listen to the white noise around you. You should have your head down and do what you know that you're doing best. But, you know, that's a perfect example of if you're in someone's office and they say no, ask. You know, you have to ask. It's like I see women leaving rooms and they're like, I go, how was it? It was really great. It was a great meeting. I was like, okay. Like, you know, then you can't get back in the room, right? Because no one's that honest. And so you got to ask, are you interested in me and are you going to invest in me? Can I ask you a question? Why did you invest in this one instead? And you know what? If more women started asking those questions, they'd probably make a lot more men on the other side of the table more uncomfortable as more women came to talk to them because they expect these women to say, enough of this bullshit. You know, I had someone that went in and pitched to someone that I know really well. And by the way, her company's killing it right now. And he basically said to her, I would give you money, but I know that you're going to probably build this company like $10 million. And then, you know, you'll sell it and I really won't make that much money. And I said, what did you say? She's like, I said, let me guess. You like started telling him all this data about your company. I said, how about the fact that you've been at it for so long, that you know what the future is? And I go, and you know what your answer should have been like? Fuck you. You don't even know me. And that's my business. You know, and I know that's hard because I can say that because I don't give a shit. And I know that you have to get money from people. But I do think that if there is a way to say something to someone on the other side of the table that says, I built my business, I know what I'm doing, and obviously you don't, in a very pleasant way, but get across that you're bold and you're tough and you're a woman entrepreneur.
Awesome. All right, anything else?
Hi there. Carla McKay with the Crushed Line app. So I'm actually based in San Francisco, but I'm having much more success here in New York because there's so much noise in San Francisco right now. So I'm loving New York. I'm getting meetings. It's, I don't know, just more opportunity. But I guess my question is, I love the idea of women funding women, but what have we learned and what are we going to see in your mind more of with just getting women to invest in women? Because there's plenty of women in Silicon Valley, but we're just not seeing it as women investors. So can you speak to that, and can you speak to going outside of the metropolitan areas? Because yeah, I have a friend who's based in Chicago, and she's having a lot more success than I am because it's not this crowded marketplace.
Yeah, I mean, I swear to God, I think that Silicon Valley has like this water well behind some of these offices, and they just scoop up the money and give it away without any thought. You know, I think it's much easier in New York for women than it is for in San Francisco. I have a couple companies in San Francisco that have had success that are women, which is great. But it's very expensive to be out there. You are competing against everyone with the same, you know, top people. So in many ways, I don't think it is a good place to have a company. But you know, there are investors everywhere. I mean, there's a whole group down in Florida. There's a whole group down in Atlanta. There are investors all over this country. You just have to find the ones that believe in you. But I think New York as a whole, they take their investing very seriously, and they really look at, is this something that makes sense for us or for me or what have you? Whereas in Silicon Valley, I mean, really, I don't get it.
No, and that's a really great point, because a lot of people in these, you know, other markets don't always know where to look. They don't know who the angels are and who has funds to invest. So a little bit of a plug here, but rather than do a new book, I'm creating a website that'll be a, you know, sort of a living, breathing hub for local investing news, education, and content. And one of the things I want to do is have people be able to put in their zip code and bring up, like, yeah, well, here are your angel networks, here are your economic development funds, here are your, you know, micro loan organizations, your, you know, foundation, whoever's active in the area, your crowdfunding, you know, local crowdfunding sites. There's a lot of activity going on, but nobody knows where to find it. So that's my idea that I'm working on, and hopefully that will help you soon.
And I will invest in that. I need that.
That's an awesome idea. I think that's going to be really great. Definitely in line with local investing. All right. Who's next?
Then, my name is Billy. I have a wearable tech company. I'm really curious. We've talked so much about the challenges for entrepreneurs, but I want to know what your challenges are every day as a woman in this business.
Sure. I mean, I'm in my next career right now. My kids just all went to college, so life has changed for me. But I think that you know, many of the challenges has been you know, being present in my children's life while still having a business and doing things that I love to keep myself, you know, my brain entertained. And it's not easy. I think that nobody can do it all, at least at the same time. And I think that has been certainly a challenge. I think my biggest challenge is my eyes are much bigger than my stomach, and so you know, there's times where I'm like, oh my God, I took on too much, and then the next day I'm like, oh, I'm fine. So I think that you know, that's probably my biggest issue.
I have a follow-up. So you talked about it being like specifically hard for women to get into investing. Why and how did you get into investing? And it sounds like it was a second career, but like, how did it happen?
Yeah, it was definitely probably my 15th career.
Okay.
I was involved in the first generation of the web, and then, you know, New York City essentially imploded. I mean, anyone that was involved in technology either disappeared and went somewhere else. Actually, very few of those people from those original companies like came back. to start companies. It's sort of fascinating, but really as I started blogging at that time, because I didn't want to lose my cred in the industry. And the other hand is I also had basically at this point I had built 3 men's businesses. This is number 2, and I was just like, I'm resigning from that job, and I'm going to figure out what my next career is. And I'm going to start this blog. I don't know what it is, but maybe something will come out of it, and at least it's a place for me to sort of put my thoughts. And through that, I started meeting all these companies, and particularly women who would contact me. And we were starting to watch like the next generation of the web happen. And there was this one particular company that I was obsessed with, and I was reading it every single day, which was Curb Media. And I was reading Rack and Curb and Eater every single day, if not a few times a day. And I had met Locke a couple times, and my husband came home one day, and he said, they're looking for money. And I was like, well, really? And I was like, you would never invest in this. He has a thesis, in regards to, this is what we invest in, and that's what we stick with. And he said, you should invest in that company. And I was like, really? He's like, yeah, you'd be really good at this. He's like, I just have to ask my LPs because I don't think we would ever invest in the same type of things. Your interests are very different than mine, and I don't think anybody would care. I was like, okay. So I emailed Locke, got together, and said, I'd be interested in putting money in a company. And he said, great. And that's really how I started investing. And it was the perfect medium for me in regards to, I didn't want to go do a startup. I didn't want to start my own. I know exactly what it's all about. I didn't want to go back there. And so it worked out really well. I mean, the funny thing is I gave Locke more money than I've ever given anyone in the Post, because my husband always says, like, you want a lemonade stand on Monday, you want a chain by Friday. And so essentially that's what I did with investments. But I didn't think about that at the onset. It ended up being a great investment, and it was a real learning experience, because I learned this early on when I chaired a nonprofit organization, which is, well, I thought I was supposed to run it, but when you chair it, you're not supposed to run it. And so I learned, and when I invested, it's like I'm not in the company, I'm the investor. And so what exactly is my role here? And so through Locke, the reality is we learn together how you build a business and what my role is. And it was really a great opportunity, and that's how I started investing.
Okay, Cheryl. Thanks. Thank you. Hi, I'm Geisha, and I'm building a female-focused professional platform that I fully intend to rival LinkedIn. And a big aspect of that is the collaboration and the team aspect that you mentioned that women have. In the investment space, it's often talked about the pattern recognition, and that being one of the reasons why men get money over women. I'd be curious to hear if you saw a pattern among women that are successful, more successful than other women, as it comes to entrepreneurs.
I don't think so. In general, I think women are great entrepreneurs. They are, they're very methodical. They are great team leaders. They build good companies. They want input from other people around them. And they're willing to take the long road. I think that pattern recognition isn't so much about the person sitting in front of you, because everyone is so completely different, and the way they go about it is so completely different. No, I think that everyone comes about it differently, and everyone has success in different ways. And that's why culture fit is so important. You can walk down, you can walk into Facebook, stay 5 minutes. You could walk into Google and stay 5 minutes. You could walk into Yahoo and stay 5 minutes, and everyone feels different. And so each success is different based on the culture they've created. And that is why I think it's very important when you hire people in your company, there's a culture fit. If you all work together and Friday afternoons, everyone hangs out and has lunch together, and there's 2 people that don't want to have lunch, they don't belong. The culture is an important part of building a business and having that exit.
All right, we have time for one more question.
I can just yell, maybe. Okay. I'm Kristen. My question is, how important is it, do you think, if someone's looking for money, for that the investor to actually have expertise in the industry that you're going into? Is it extremely important, or is it you'd like that, but you can live without it depending on your situation?
I think that if you're talking to angels, not so much. If you're talking to micro VCs or VCs, a lot. The one thing that's consistent, although I'm obviously all over the place in regards to my investments, there is consistency among every company in the beginnings of stages. The frustrations of raising money, the frustrations you're going to run out of money, the frustrations of hiring people that you think are fantastic who end up being shitty, and then you got to hire senior people because you end up getting more money. The frustrations of understanding customer acquisition and where your customer lives, the frustration of branding your company, the frustration, do I do marketing, do I do PR? There's all of these things that it doesn't matter what your company is, those are the beginnings. But I do think once you get to a certain level, and you maybe get more money, if you're an e-commerce platform and you've had investors that really understand how to build big businesses in e-commerce or big marketplaces, or products that are more on the hard goods, and I do think that there's tremendous value because those people have gone through successes and failures and can spend a lot of time, help you not waste a lot of time going down the same hole because they've seen someone go down it before. So that is really valuable.
All right, I want to thank everyone else again for coming, especially Joanne and Amy. I want to say that moving forward, I know I mentioned Justwomen as a community, right? And what's a community if it doesn't continue? So we're going to be doing a series of different events circled around different themes and topics that are important to women like yourselves, right? Women involved in the entrepreneurial space and building businesses. So would love to see you all there. I'll be sending information to each and every one of you, and if you are a guest of somebody that came along, then my email address is valerie@justworks.com. And also, we have a Facebook group called Justwomen. So like the page, and we'll be posting future events there. Now feel free to stay and for a bit longer. We have more drinks, there's still some food left, network with each other, get to know each other, and have an awesome time. Thank you again.